Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Daily Grey Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and it's the 31st of October 2023. Right, everyone, let's get into it. So, kicking off today, we have some positive regulatory news out of the UK here. So, Brian Quintes, who is the ex-CFTC commissioner in the US here, who now works as head of policy at A16Z Crypto, tweeted out basically a summary of what this kind of news out of the UK is today. So, he starts off the thread by saying, or the tweet by saying, the long-awaited conclusionary statement from UK HMT on its crypto asset regulatory regime has arrived, and it is wonderful. And the main points here that Brian highlights is that specifically, HMT's response excludes airdrops from the token issuance regulatory perimeter for now, recognizing that they do not constitute a public offering, basically saying that airdrops are not securities, unlike in the US, where we have zero guidance on that, and teams are foregoing airdropping literally free money to people in the US because they are scared of the SEC. That it's just ridiculous, right? The second point here is that the response clarifies that NFTs are out of scope, specifically citing in-game purchases and sales of digital items as an example of non-financial services activity. Just a common sense approach there, honestly. I don't see why the US hasn't adopted that approach either. Third point, it reiterates a go-it-slow approach on DeFi and officially recognizes that DeFi will play an important role in financial services, and outright banning it is obviously not an option here. And the fourth point is that the response strongly disagrees with the suggestion to regulate crypto trading as gambling or an outright ban on crypto, citing such approaches divergence from international regulatory workstreams and the associated detriment to crypto-based innovation. So obviously, as you can see, very positive here, very level-headed kind of response and very common sense response. Definitely very different to what we're seeing out of the US here. Now, this gets me excited because, as I've mentioned before, Australia, where I live in Australia, they tend to follow the UK when it comes to, I guess, like policy around financial services and financial markets. So if the UK is going down this path, which it seems that they are, it means that Australia is most likely to follow. So obviously, positive news for me here. Whereas when you look at the US, they seem to take their own approach to everything. So I wouldn't expect the US to be too much informed by the UK's response here. But at the same time, I do think we've seen I guess, like better regulatory kind of stuff coming out of the US over the last few months, specifically around kind of assets like ETH, for example, because obviously there was a lot of FUD for a while there that ETH was going to be classified as security or that the SEC was going after ETH. And I think by now it should be obvious to everyone that that's not going to be the case. I mean, it was obvious to me at the time, but I think by now it should be obvious to everyone that that's not going to be the case. And, even outside of ETH, the SEC has just continued to lose in court, losing against Grayscale, losing against Ripple. Right, they're going up against Coinbase, and it looks like they're probably going to lose against Coinbase if, and they may even just withdraw their suit against Coinbase, right? But I doubt they're going to do that because that would just put egg on their face. Losing is probably the better path than actually just withdrawing the case altogether for them. But we'll have to kind of see how that kind of shakes out there. But generally, I can recommend going and checking out this full kind of response here. It's linked here. I'll link it in the YouTube description below, but I'm just very happy to see this, especially as an Australian, as I said, because this does tend to bleed into Australia here. And Australia, I mean, the reason why Australia follows, I think, is because we're generally pretty conservative with a lot of things. We are very far away from everyone else. We have a financial services economy and kind of that's a big part of our economy, I should say. But at the same time, it is definitely dominated by a small handful of players. I mean, for those of you who don't know, there are only 4 major banks in Australia, and I think the top 2 probably account for over 50% of the market share. And Australia is not like the US, where there's thousands of banks spread across the country. In Australia, I think there's less than 100 banks total, and most of those banks would be tiny, right? So when looking at it like that from a, I guess, concentration perspective and centralized perspective, I think things tend to move slower because these big juggernauts just won't innovate as fast as the smaller players will. Even though they do innovate faster than I think players in the US, I think that even though these banks are big in Australia, they have been pioneers of new technologies faster than other countries have been, which has been great to see. see. But when it comes to crypto, it seems like the Australian government and the regulators, they're dragging their feet relatively kind of like slowly on this. But I think that they're going to catch up, especially over the next couple of years, as the UK puts forward these things, as the US becomes friendlier, right? And in Australia specifically, actually, I did go to that event in Sydney. It was a few months ago now, where there was a lot of policy people there, a lot of people from TradFi there, regulatory people, and yeah, the conversation is changing. I think. Post obviously FTX and all the collapses we saw last year, it seems like a distant memory now. I know that the SBF trial or the FTX trial, whatever you want to call it, is ongoing right now, but that seems more like a kind of a circus that you watch and get entertainment from, rather than anything that's going to harm crypto. I think at this point in time, all the harm that would have done has long since passed. The memory of it is, I mean, it seems like it happened a while ago now, right? And of course, the crypto markets are looking very positive right now. Obviously, with Bitcoin breaching up to 35K recently, the ETF stuff. So generally, I think, as I've said plenty of times in the past, a few green candles tend to make everything seem more positive than what it is. But if we actually drill down into what we're seeing on the regulatory front, it does look more positive, I think. But in saying that, there are some places where it still looks very bleak. And I think one of those places is definitely when it comes to privacy on chain. Because as we've seen, there has not been any let up from OFAC against Tornado Cash. We've seen some stuff around ThorChain recently, I think. It depends what we're going to see with other protocols or other projects like Nocturne and Aztec. It's just going to be an uphill battle, I think, for privacy stuff. But I guess that's not exclusive to crypto. It's definitely something that doesn't just exist for financial markets either. It also exists for communications just generally. There has been a war on encryption since encryption, or I guess like since digital encryption has been around. There's been a war on privacy. There's been a war on encrypted chats, with all the prefaces of, we need to stop terrorism financing. We need to stop, child exploitation, all these sorts of stuff. And yeah, sure, we need to stop that, but not at the cost of everyone's kind of liberties, right? And everyone's privacy and everyone's right to privacy. I mean, I strongly believe that, of course. And it's kind of funny me saying that because that's a very American belief, I think. It definitely drilled into American culture. But in Australia, we are a bit different there. We are definitely, I don't feel like that's something that we have in Australia as a culture more generally, because as I said, Australia is generally pretty conservative in terms of its approaches to things. And we don't have like a constitution like the US has, where it's binding and it's part of the social contract, all that sorts of stuff there. But I think that these days, I think of myself more as a citizen of Ethereum, as a citizen of the crypto movement, more than a citizen of Australia, right? And the nation state that I'm in. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Australia, but I'm much more aligned with Ethereum values and Ethereum's mission and crypto values generally than I am with a lot of the kind of values that are prevalent in Australia right now. So yeah, anyway, enough ranting about that. As I said, you can check out this tweet and also the full response here. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so we have some updates from Dencun today, or at least one major update from Dencun today. So Terence said here that the core devs are likely moving forward with adding something called Blob Sidecar inclusion proofs for Deneb. Deneb is the consensus layer client upgrade for Dencun. The PR and some implementers notes are linked here and in the HackMD document, and last minute feedback is welcome. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because it's not something small that's happening on Deneb. This is actually a pretty major change, and it's being done for a bunch of different reasons, which you can actually read in the HackMD document here. Terence lists out the positives and also the challenges. I think that the main... I don't know if I'd call it a negative, but the main knock on this that I can see is that it's going to take a little bit of time to get this implemented into the clients. Now, of course, I have said that Dencun is not slated to go live on mainnet this year at all, and it's probably not going to go live on mainnet until February at this rate, honestly. Like, if I had to say a month at this point in time, January, it seems like a coin toss. It seems more likely to be February, especially if they were to implement something like this, because it requires additional testing and stuff like that. But generally, I think that because we have that extra time there, there'll be more time to test this sort of stuff, implement it. And as I said, it is, from my understanding, a big, significant change, but I don't think it's something that's going to require a significant amount of testing from my read, which is where the roadblocks tend to happen on. As we've seen over the last couple months, especially with EIP 4844 and testing blobs generally, there has been a lot of roadblocks that have kind of popped up in the testing that have caused, I guess, like the delays here. I think that if those roadblocks hadn't popped up, we probably would have seen Dencun in, maybe late November, early December sort of thing. But because the testing obviously has to be done, and we discovered bugs and different kind of intricacies that we had to work through, it's kind of led to that. I mean, I said delay, but it's not really a delay because there was never a date given, right? But it's led to that kind of thing where it's going to take a bit longer for this to go live here. So yeah, you can read, as I said, this HackMD document. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But I mean, I can try and TLDR what this actually is, but it's getting a bit technical for me, and I don't fully understand it myself yet. So I didn't really want to TLDR it here. But essentially, the Terrence lists the main benefit here is that it prevents equivocation, blobs, and allows cleaner beacon and builder API integrations. Like that's probably not going to mean anything to you guys. I mean, it doesn't really mean anything to me on the surface of things because obviously I'm not a core dev. But as Terrence says here as well, the downside is the time for implementation. But he thinks it's a cost worth paying because it's short-term pain for long-term gain here. So yeah, if you want to understand what this change is and why it's being implemented so late into the Dencun development cycle here, you can go give this document a read, and also the GitHub pull request. I'll link that as part of the tweet in the YouTube description below for you to do so. But as I said, I think that the testing on this stuff shouldn't take that long. It's more just getting it implemented in terms of like getting it implemented into the APIs, but also into obviously the clients themselves, and then testing that, and then obviously getting ready for mainnet sometime in early 2024. All right, so we have an update out of Obol here today. So the first distributed validator MEV block on mainnet was proposed over the weekend. So this was part of the Operation Solo Staker initiative being run out of EtherFi here, and you can see here on Etherscan this block being proposed here. Now, as Ashin says here, this block was proposed by a distributed validator through the MEV Boost network, and this is the first one to be kind of constructed like that, which is very, very cool to see, because obviously if you're building validator software, distributed validator software, you need it to work with MEV Boost because it is a core part of the Ethereum kind of build a life cycle. It's not a core part of the protocol, obviously, but like 95% of the network uses it, and if you're not using it, you're missing out on a pretty substantial amount of rewards from the execution layer. So obviously, if people are going to be using DVT, it needs to work with the MEV Boost software, which you can see here it does, because there is a block that was proposed here, which is really, really awesome to see. So I just wanted to highlight that for you guys. I think Obol, I don't know when they're planning to go live on mainnet. I think it's relatively soon. I saw that Lido also is planning to either temperature check or vote on creating a module for the use of distributed validator technology within its stack. So they've got to be close-ish to mainnet at this point, right? And I think there is actually a roadmap for Obol somewhere. I may have highlighted it on the refuel before, but I can't remember exactly what the roadmap actually was, because obviously I can't remember everything. But you can probably find it on their website. So you can go to their website at obol.tech. That's obol.tech, and also it'll be obviously linked in the YouTube description below as well for you to check out. All right, so the Ethereum on ARM Twitter account tweeted out today that they've been running an Ethereum archive node using the Reth client for more than a month and a half now, with the Reth client being in Alpha 10. It seems stable aside from a minor issue. And then they continue, we need to make sure that we can run archive nodes on low-powered and affordable devices. I mean, I've talked about this, I think, last week or the week before, in the context of storing historical data on the of the Ethereum network, and how there are EIPs in place, or I guess like in the pipeline, to expire this data after like a year. And obviously running an archive node today is much heavier than running a full Ethereum node, but it's not like it's heavier to the point where you need to actually have high-powered hardware to do it. You can run it on low-powered hardware. like for example, I run my my archive node, which is a Geth archive node, on a consumer PC. It's like sitting right across from me. I can see it from here, and that runs fine. Like I never have any issues with it. It's just sitting there running, and it's actually a really small box as well. I haven't managed to test or run one on a Raspberry Pi or a Rock 5B board or anything like that just yet, but I think the Ethereum on ARM people are actually doing this, and testing it on this. But the whole point obviously is to make it so that it is as accessible as possible to run this stuff, because obviously the main bottleneck is going to be storage. Now the storage costs can run quite high depending on what type of archive node you want to sync, because what you can do is you can sync an entire archive node, which I think is over 20 terabytes right now, and that gives you basically everything from Genesis. It basically replays all the state from Genesis. Or you can sync a full node up to the current block and then start syncing it as an archive node, which is actually what I did. But obviously over time, it saves space on the initial sync and saves time on the initial sync, but over time it'll fill up that space there. In my machine, I have about 18 terabytes of SSD space. That did not come cheap. I think it was like $3,000 or $3,500, and that's Australian dollars. I don't know what that is in US dollars off the top of my head there. But as I said, it is running still on consumer hardware, and the other, I guess, like the total cost for the box itself. And don't get me wrong, this box is also overkill for what I'm doing on it. But the total cost, I think, from memory for the entire thing, including the storage, it can't be more than 5,000 Australian dollars. And as I said, you can do it for less than that. And you can even do it for less than that on the storage as well. And obviously, these prices are coming down all the time. And in US dollars, I'm not sure what it is. It's probably like 3,000 US dollars or something like that. And this is for like running a full archive node here. Now, if you can run an archive node on a Raspberry Pi and or a Rock 5B board, even better, right? You just have to get the necessary storage space, and that's your main cost there, and then you can run it all well and good. But yeah, I do agree with the Ethereum on ARM account here, where they said that we need to make sure that we can run them on these low power devices, because that's like at the heart of everything we're doing in Ethereum. The reason why the Ethereum layer 1 is so unscalable is because we've basically traded off layer 1 scalability for the scalability, or I guess like the effectiveness and efficiency of being able to run a full node or an archive node on consumer hardware, instead of requiring massive data centers to run these things, which is one thing that the Ethereum community and ecosystem greatly prides itself on. So yeah, anyway, you can check out Ethereum on ARM for yourself. They've got a bunch of ARM images for various different things. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, we have a fresh blog post from Vitalik today talking about all the different types of layer 2s. So obviously, as you guys know, there are various different types of layer 2s that I've talked about before, such as rollups and validiums. But in between them, there are other types as well. There's like hybrid rollups, hybrid validiums, and a hybrid validium being a thing where essentially you can have your data posted off chain, but then if you want to post it on chain, you can pay for that privilege, and it'll get posted on chain there. Now, what Vitalik's blog post tries to do is reason through all of these things, and also kind of caveat them with the important caveats that come with reasoning through them here. And he's also got a nice little graphic here that you can see of the different kind of layers and above layers, a layer 2 as well, such as the layer 3s or 4s, whatever you want to call them. And what they are, he's kind of assigned a classical element to them, as you can see here, why we need them, and examples of them. So I'll start from the bottom here. So he's got layer 0, which is the people layer, right? The social consensus layer. So something I talk about all the time. It's kind of like it got the code name of layer 0, and then you've got the classical element being kind of water here, and then why. It's hard to pin down, but stable in its own way as to why. And yeah, I mean, the social layer is definitely the most kind of like confusing thing to explain to people, I think. And examples obviously are Bitcoin and Ethereum's social layer being very strong there. A layer 1 is a base layer chain. Why? It's slow but sturdy, the foundation on which everything else depends upon. And obviously more examples of this are Bitcoin and Ethereum. And then you've got layer 2 plus that favor security. So these are obviously full rollups. So these are fully backed by the security of L1, can read the L1. If you have assets inside the L2, you can always withdraw them to the L1. It extends layer 1 with high energy needed for scalability. So it's basically an extension of Ethereum's block space. And examples of this include obviously rollups, Plasma, which were kind of like the, I guess, like first version of rollups, or they're not really the same thing, but they're like rollups are like the spiritual successor to to Plasma, and then channels like state channels, something like what the Lightning Network is built upon. And then you've got layer 2+ that are scale favoring. So it commits into L1 directly or indirectly, can read L1, and offers some guarantees that's better than a multi-sig but weaker than full security. And why we would want this: it's lighter and faster as an upper layer, but not the place to rely on for top security. Obviously, these are things like validiums and rollups with pre-confirmation confirmation times here, but yeah, that's basically the main matrix there. But if you want to dive deeper into any of these things, I highly recommend reading Vitalik's blog post here, because I think this is going to be very, very important going forward. Because as you guys know, there are a proliferation of L2s happening right now, and they are definitely not all created equal. And all you need to do is go to the L2Beat website to see how different a lot of these L2s actually are. And if I go to the L2Beat website, you can actually see this. And this actually mirrors how different the L1s are, by the way. Like sometimes people will go, oh, what's the use of L2s if they're all so different to each other? Well, okay, in the world that you think should exist of a multi-layer 1 world, it's the same thing, right? And it's arguably worse because, there's no such thing as an L1 beat, right? And also on top of that, L1s are very much a lot more difficult to build and to secure than an L2, right? So when you look at this and you look at the differences between the different L2s, they're all rated based on the same stages. They're all working towards these same stages in their own way, and they all use, obviously their own kind of flavor of the technology. But we have a baseline for each of these things, and we have the stages as listed on L2Beat.com and as originally kind of posited by Vitalik here. And yeah, as I said, you can see how different a lot of these are, even just in what the stages they're in, obviously the technology that they use. And it's funny because Arbitrum and Optimism both use an optimistic rollup technology, but their tech stacks are very different to each other. And then you can go and see the different ZK rollup stacks or ZK EVM stacks. They're not going to be clones of each other, because having, an exact clone is not going to differentiate you. Yes, they're all EVM compatible, but the thing is that being EVM compatible or EVM equivalent is table stakes, right? It is something that you need to have if you want to succeed as an L2. Even Starknet, which is a non-EVM L2, is adding EVM support or types of EVM support and kind of things like the transpile that I've discussed before. I've discussed it plenty of times on the refuel, so yeah, and then you've obviously got the different constructions like Optimiums and Validiums and stuff like that as well there. But anyway, you can go check out Vitalik's blog post. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, so Jesse Polak from Coinbase tweeted out something that I thought was very interesting, where he said, every new Coinbase engineer now goes through a full on-chain curriculum and hackathon, all on the base L2. The first class of 30 just demoed on-chain coupons, on-chain Pomodoro, on-chain fantasy sports, on-chain tickets, on-chain carbon credits. So this is super cool because I think Coinbase is the closest we have to a centralized company being kind of, I guess, like on-chain native, so to speak, right? And what better than to have all of your incoming engineers work on an on-chain product, right? As part of like an internal hackathon in order to understand exactly what Coinbase is trying to do with Base, what they're trying to do as a company, and how they're trying to scale out the Coinbase ecosystem. Because the Coinbase ecosystem is not just the centralized exchange, it is the wallet, it is the layer 2, right? It is their institutional stuff as well, which they're probably going to want to bring the institutions on-chain to here. So there's a lot of different things that are happening here. So it's a really great initiative that they're running, with obviously Jesse Polak leading it here to get people to build on Base. Now, speaking of Base as well, there was an update here from Roberto Bayardo, who gave an update on Farcaster today, where he said, let me tell you a bit about one aspect of the Base engineering team's work, which is our contributions to the OP stack. Now, I'll link this thread in the YouTube description below. You can go check it out. The TLDR is that the Base engineering team has been putting in the work to get EIP 4844 ready within the OP stack as part of the Canyon upgrade, so that basically on the day that Dencun goes live, the OP stack chains, all of them, can immediately take advantage of EIP 4844. Now, this should answer the question that I've gotten a lot from people before about how long it would take for these various L2s to basically get to the point where they can take advantage of 4844. Well, they're working on it today. They're working on it now, and they actually have more time than they probably otherwise thought they did, because of the fact that Dencun is probably not going live until like February at this rate, right? So they've got time to get this work done, get it out onto their relevant tech stacks, and then or their respective tech stacks, I should say. and then make sure that it's ready to go on day one, because immediately they'll be able to lower fees for end users. And as I've said before, 4844 is one of the biggest end user facing upgrades that we've had in a while on Ethereum, because most of the upgrades over the last couple of years have been not user facing, whereas 4844, while technically not directly user facing, it is user facing in that the downstream effect is that it scales the L2, and then the L2s obviously can lower their fees, and the users get the benefit of that. So instead of paying whatever it is these days on the L2 at a certain Gwei amount, 10 cents or less, it's going to be like a cent or less, because as I've said before, blobs don't share the same fee market as the rest of L1 Ethereum. So they're going to have their own EIP 1559 style fee market, where obviously, fees are still burned and all that, but they're not going to be subject to the fee spikes on L1, because as you have noticed over the last, I guess, couple of weeks, L1 fees are back to being relatively high again. 20 plus Gwei I'm seeing quite regularly now, 30 plus Gwei. And this definitely does currently affect L2s, because L2s use call data, or I should say rollups use call data, and that the cost of call data is, the fee market for call data is shared with the rest of the L1. So once we have 4844 in place, these spikes are no longer relevant. The 4844, the rollup fees will only be dictated by the 4844 fee market instead of the rest of the Ethereum network here. But anyway, I'll link this cast in the YouTube description below. You can go check it out for yourself. All right, an update out of POAP today. So they said here, for some time now, we've been refreshing the POAP product suite with a new look and feel to make your POAP experience the best it can be. Today, we're excited to release the new and improved POAP scan into the wild. So they've updated the interface to make browsing your collection really easy and look very nice. Obviously, that's kind of like one of the main draws of POAP, is having a really easy to view and really nice to view collection here. But if I go here and I kind of maybe search Sasol.eth, I can show you what this currently looks like. So I'm just search Sasol.eth, and I mean, the website looks great, right? I love purple. Purple's actually my favorite color, for those of you who didn't know. You probably don't know that. I don't think I've mentioned that before. But you can see here, I need to be collecting more POAPs, that's for sure. But you can see here all of mine listed here. Apparently, I didn't collect any in September. Sad panda, right? But you can see them all, and they're listed here. March, I seem to have collected a lot. Oh, that's because I was at ETH Denver. You can see all the ETH Denver related POAPs, right? Yeah, and then you can just scroll down and see the history of your POAPs here. You can, of course, connect your wallet instead of just searching, but yeah, this is what the new kind of interface looks like, which, yeah, looks really cool to me, honestly, and it loads pretty quickly, which is great. It's got progressive loading, as you can see here. But yeah, this is great. And maybe on the subject of POAPs as well, I should tease that there is currently a Daily Gwei Rug Fuel POAP being created by some community members. Now, this POAP is basically going to be something that you'll be able to collect every time I miss a Daily Gwei Refuel episode. And it's funny because it's going to act like a way for me to essentially not do rug fuels as often, or try my absolute hardest not to do rug fuels as often, because I don't want this POAP to be something that is very common. I want it to be a rare POAP, right? I want it to be one of the rarest POAPs. I don't want it to be something that that you guys are collecting every week. So that'll hopefully be ready to go live soon, and I'll announce it in the Discord channel and on obviously the refuel when it does. The grand irony will be if there's a rug fuel on the same day that the rug fuel POAP comes out, because what I'm planning on doing is I'm going to do edition 0 of the rug fuel POAP as like the honorary one, to give everyone a POAP for all the rug fuels that have happened in the past. So you'll have probably a week to claim that, and then I'll make a POAP with the relevant date on it every single time I do a rug fuel there, just as a little something to, I guess, like tide you guys over, because I know that you guys get pretty antsy whenever I miss an episode, because it's part of your, probably for a lot of you, your kind of morning routine, especially if you're in the US, because I know this comes out in the morning US time there. But anyway, you can go check out this new POAP scan experience. I'll link that in the YouTube description below, but I think that's going to be it for today. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.